The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting an orange glow over the sprawling fields of Clover Creek. This land, rich in history and even richer in crops, belonged to a man named Hank Murphy. To the people around, Hank was just a farmer, sure, but under that weathered exterior beat the heart of a lion. And little did he know, a storm was brewing just beyond the fields, a storm that would test his courage like never before. It started on a Tuesday, a day like any other. Hank was out in his fields, the scent of damp earth mingling with the sweet fragrance of blooming sunflowers. He hummed softly to himself, the steady rhythm of his hands working the soil a comfort to his soul. But that comfort shattered like glass when a rumble of engines broke the peaceful silence. Hank turned, squinting against the sun as he saw a convoy of trucks racing down the dirt road leading to his farm. He recognized one of the men right away, Tony, the shark Romano. Unbeknownst to many, Tony wasn't just a local tough guy. He was the right hand of a ruthless gang looking to expand their territory. Hank's land was prime real estate, and to them it was a golden ticket. Instead of running for cover, fear coursing through his veins, Hank straightened his back and dug his heels into the soil. This was his land and no one was taking it away. As the trucks came to a halt, dust rising around them, Hank's heart raced. Tony stepped out, confidence oozing like a thick fog. Behind him loomed two more men, tattoos inked across their arms and a swagger in their step that screamed trouble. The air grew thick with tension. Tony called out, a grin splitting his face. Hank crossed his arms, defiance etched into his weathered face. "You can talk all you want, Romano." Tony laughed, shrugging as if Hank's words were nothing but a light breeze. "You misunderstand. We're not here to negotiate." A moment stretched, each second feeling like an eternity. Hank's heart pounded against his ribs, but he took a step closer, his voice steady. "You think you can just come in here and bully me? This land has been in my family for generations." The two men exchanged glances. A flicker of surprise crossed Tony's face before he smirked again. "Fighting sounds fun." With that, he motioned to his men. Hank's stomach twisted. He had lived in the shadows of their reputation, a reputation steeped in intimidation and violence. But fear was a foreign concept when it came to his home. As the two henchmen took a step towards him, Hank pushed past the rising panic in his chest. He had one chance. The words boomed like thunder, and even the wind seemed to still. Caught off guard, the thugs paused, their bravado faltering ever so slightly. Hank seized the moment, his voice ringing with an intensity that surprised even him. "I've fought harder battles than you'll ever know." And that's when Hank felt something shift. The encroaching fear retreated, replaced by a grounding resolve that breathed life into his weary body. He could see the hesitation painted across Tony's face. Behind that cocky grin, perhaps even he felt a flicker of doubt. Hank could almost hear the low whispers of his ancestors in the wind, urging him not to back down. This was more than just land. It was the heartbeat of his family's legacy. A legacy built on blood, sweat, and tears. Realizing they might be in over their heads, Tony stepped forward, his demeanor changing slightly. "You're playing a dangerous game, old man." With every word Tony spit, Hank felt a fresh surge of fury. "You listen here. If you think I'll roll over, you're sorely mistaken. I won't let fear dictate my fate," he roared, letting the fire within him blaze. There was a moment of silence, and Hank could feel the weight of the air, thick and heavy around them. It seemed the whole world held its breath, caught in the balance of confrontation. Then, an unexpected glimmer began to appear, the first sign of resistance from the townspeople. A couple of old friends and neighbors who had been farming in Clover Creek their entire lives had gathered at the edge of the field. They had witnessed everything unfold. Hank standing firm against the gang, his resolve lighting a fire in their own hearts. One by one, they stepped forward, courage igniting like a wildfire. The small group quickly grew. Soon, Hank wasn't standing alone. Voices rose, filling the air with determination. Yelled Alice, a fierce woman who had watched the land evolve alongside her family's history. It was no longer just Hank's battle. It was a legion formed from shared history and a collective will to protect what was rightfully theirs. The weight of their unity swelled around Hank. He felt invincible. Tony's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the growing crowd. The sheer number of those who stood with Hank seemed to shrink the bravado of his gang. their swagger dissipating like morning mist. Tony sneered, but the quaver in his tone betrayed him. "We'll be back." "No, you won't," Hank stated confidently, his voice ringing out clearer than ever. Without another word, Tony climbed back into his truck, fists tight on the steering wheel. His men followed suit, their faces a mix of frustration and surprise. As they sped off, the dust kicked up hung in the air, a reminder of a battle won at least for now. Hank turned back to his friends, heart still racing from the confrontation. There was a shared energy, an unspoken bond pulsing in the space between them. It was not just about the land anymore. It was about respect, pride, and the unwavering support of those who believed in standing against the tide. Together, they had crafted a wall of strength against intimidation. Over the following weeks, the whispers of Tony's gang faded, but Hank kept his guard up. He fortified his defenses, working day and night alongside his neighbors to restore what had been battered. They mended fences, repaired broken gates, and cultivated the land, transforming it into a haven of resilience. One afternoon, as the sun kissed the horizon, Hank stood outside, surveying the well-tended fields. His heart brimmed with gratitude. The battle hadn't just been against Tony Romano and his gang. It had been a battle to reclaim his own spirit. The land had indeed challenged him, but so had the courage found in the people around him. Then, just as the sun sank low, casting a golden hue across the now peaceful fields, a shadow loomed off in the distance. Hank's stomach dropped. A convoy of trucks, unmistakably familiar, rumbled down the dirt road again. Tony had returned, but this time there was a different energy. His demeanor suggested he wasn't here just to talk. Hank felt the heat of anger bubbling beneath the surface. He stepped forward, the weight of every person who stood with him fueling his resolve. If Tony thought he could intimidate them so easily again, he was sorely mistaken. As the trucks rolled closer, Hank gathered his friends, their unity breathing life into a fortified spirit. Standing shoulder to shoulder, Hank's heart raced, but this time it wasn't fear. It was a call to action. They had worked tirelessly together to cultivate this land, to protect what belonged to them, and to ensure that their legacies would echo through the generations. This wasn't just a piece of property, it was hope, a struggle against injustice, a testament of their will to stand strong. As Tony climbed out of the truck, a menacing smile spread across his face, but this time the look in Hank's eyes was impenetrable. Hank called, his voice steady and unyielding. Tony shouted back, a fire in his eyes. Hank took a step forward, fueled by a fierce determination that banished any remnants of fear. "I won't let you, not now." That day, what started as a simple farmer's call to action had transformed into an entire community standing against tyranny. The wind carried the weight of their defiance, as if the very earth beneath their feet roared in agreement. The battle was far from over, but as they stood shoulder to shoulder, it became clear that this was more than just a clash over land. It was a testament to the human spirit, grounded in love, loyalty, and a desire to fend for what was rightfully theirs. And in that moment, as the sun set low, staining the sky with strokes of fire and gold, Hank knew he would fight for this land, this community, and for every heart that beat alongside his own. They would face whatever storms lay ahead, determined to defend their legacy together. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the sprawling fields of Willow Creek. Bob Harrison stood on his porch, a weathered figure etched against the backdrop of ripe corn and swaying wheat. For generations, his family had worked this land, but today, he felt an undercurrent of anxiety ripple through the evening air. Little did he know that anxiety was the calm before the storm. Just as he was about to head inside for dinner, he heard the unmistakable roar of engines approaching. Bob squinted down the dirt road, his gut clenching as 3 black trucks came into view, dust trailing behind them like a dark cloud. A sense of foreboding gripped him. He recognized the trucks. They belonged to a notorious gang that had been circling the area like vultures, waiting for their next target. A knot twisted in Bob's stomach. He'd heard stories of how these criminals forced others off their land. Stories of intimidation and violence that made even the toughest folks cower. But for Bob, this was more than just land. It was his heritage, his legacy, and he was not about to let it slip away. The trucks came to a halt in front of his home, and outstepped Tony the Knife Ramirez, the gang leader known for his ruthless persona. He was flanked by two muscular enforcers, their tattoos telling tales of battles fought and won for the wrong side of the law. Bob stood tall, facing them with a courage born from decades of tilling the very soil that surrounded him. "Evening, Bob," Tony greeted with an unsettling grin, the kind that could chill a man's blood. "Talk all you want, Tony," Bob replied, his voice steady, "but I'm not selling." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that flickered like ghosts across the ground, heightening the tension in the air. Bob swallowed hard, feeling his heart pounding in his chest, a primal drumbeat reminding him that he was alive and fighting for something real. "Listen," Tony said, taking a few bold steps closer. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, dark and ominous. Bob's chest tightened, but the rage bubbling within him cut through the fear. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. "Let me make this clear. I'll never let you take what's mine," he shot back, every word weighted with conviction. Tony stepped back, surprise flickering across his face. "You're playing a dangerous game, old man." He glanced at his enforcers, a signal that sent a shiver through Bob's spine. But still, Bob held his ground, the raw essence of his family's legacy grounding him like an anchor. "I've worked this land for over 30 years. My children were raised here, and their children will be too." A moment stretched like an elastic band, filled with unspoken words and tension that could be sliced through. Then, for a fleeting second, Bob saw uncertainty in Tony's eyes, recognizing the fierceness of a man willing to fight for his roots. Suddenly, the sound of rustling drew their attention. A group of neighbors had gathered at the edge of Bob's property, drawn by the commotion. They were farmers' mothers, fathers, people who knew hardship and had faced their own battles against this gang in the past. Bob's heart surged as he saw familiar faces: Tom from down the road, Lisa and her husband, even the old Miller couple whose farm had been taken from them just last year. They stepped forward as one, their voices united in solidarity. Tom shouted, taking a defiant stance beside him. The weight of the moment shifted dramatically. The gang realized they were now outnumbered, and neighbors who had once lived in the shadow of fear stood together, courage igniting like a wildfire in their chests. Tony's bravado wavered. "You all think you can intimidate us. You're nothing but scared farmers without a clue," he barked defensively. But Bob stepped forward, emboldened. "We're not scared anymore. We're standing together." His voice rang loud and clear, a battle cry fueled by the shared pain of countless losses to the gang. As if feeling the pulse of collective resolve, the neighbors surged forth, flaxen-haired kids clutching their mothers' hands, fathers bracing their children behind them. This was more than just a defense of Bob's land. It had evolved into a fight for everyone in the community, standing against the tyranny that had choked them all. With the odds shifting, Tony began to sweat, his composed facade cracking just slightly. "You think this is over?" His voice was laced with irritation and fear. "No," Bob replied, calm and unwavering. "This is just the beginning of us standing up for what's right." The sun sank lower, bleeding reds and oranges into the sky, casting everyone in hues that looked almost angelic. It was a stark contrast to the darkness that had tried to envelop them. As Tony narrowed his eyes, he clambered back into his truck, his enforcers falling behind him like discarded flotsam. They drove off in a cloud of dust, but Bob and his neighbors were filled with more than just the relief of having chased them away. Change was in the air, a sense of newfound power that resonated through the crowd. In the following days, murmurs of solidarity spread, and Bob organized meetings to discuss a plan. Neighbors gathered at the barn, where trampled hay and rustic beams mixed with the scent of fresh coffee, an invigorating warmth against the chill of uncertainty. The community mapped out a strategy, devising ways to protect their homes and land. Fear shifted into determination, igniting conversations about community watches and building barriers. They united, tying bonds tighter than the saddles on their steeds. Bob felt like a leader, a beacon of hope guiding them through these dark times. But silence can be a predator too. The nights crept in with shadows long and dark, and while Bob endeavored to protect his home, he knew Tony wouldn't leave it alone. The gang would be licking their wounds, planning the next move in their twisted game. Weeks later, the time arrived for a showdown that no one anticipated. Under the cloak of darkness, Tony returned with a handful of men, this time wielding more force than before, emboldened by the strike of pride. They were armed not just with guns, but with the arrogance of a group that believed they could achieve anything with intimidation. Bob, taking a deep breath, rallied his neighbors. "Tonight, we stand firm." His voice rang out, swollen with fervor, igniting flames of courage in all who heard. They positioned themselves around the perimeter of Bob's property, determined to tackle whatever might come. The crushing weight of night wrapped around them, a silence filled with held breath. Then, like wolves descending on a prey, the gang moved in, their presence threatening the tranquil stillness with an air of inevitable chaos. A shout rang from Tony as he and his men stormed toward Bob's home, hell-bent on claiming what they believed was theirs. But this time the community was ready. Bob and his neighbors stood firm, ready to face whatever darkness came their way. With resolve etched onto their faces, Bob shouted, "You're not welcome here." The standoff escalated quickly, voices clashing like the clang of swords. But the crowd held their ground, encouraging each other with every flicker of doubt. Shouted Lisa, her eyes fierce, mirroring the strength embedded within everyone else. The gang hesitated. They moved forward, but the sheer weight of unity and bravery came crashing against them like waves against jagged rocks. Bob felt energy thrum around him, a palpable force that felt almost like magic. Tension crackled, the air thick with the scent of impending conflict. Then the first blow came, the crack of a gunshot echoing out in the night, a harbinger of chaos. But it wasn't the neighbors retaliating. It was one of Tony's men, wild with reckless abandon, aimed at the sky to assert dominance. Fear rippled through Bob's neighbors, but he raised his hand, calming the anxiety. "Stay together." With that, the energy shifted. Bob and his community charged forward, descending on the intruders. They swung implements of farming shovels and pitchforks like warriors wielding the weapons of their ancestors, defenders of the lands that once nourished them. Intensity bloomed like the explosive petals of a firework. Clashes reverberated, but amidst chaos, community amalgamated into a single heartbeat, a living organism of fiery spirits battling for survival. And then, just as it seemed like victory was theirs, Tony called for a retreat, pulling back his men, shock marking their faces. "We'll be back, Bob." As they scrambled into their trucks, the boisterous engines roared to life. Bob stood amidst his friends, hearts pounding in rhythm with their breaths, knowing quite well that moments like these would echo through time. As enemy and friend separated, it was clear something incredible had transpired that night. Together, they had thwarted darkness with light, covered in the dirt of their own labor and firm in their unity. No longer just farmers alone, they had become a fortified family, etched in resilience. As dawn arose, washing away the remnants of the night, Bob stood on that familiar porch, his gaze sweeping across the fields. The sun painted golden light upon the home he loved so dearly. He knew that the fight wasn't over, but they held the power now. With combined courage and love for one another, they could face anything the world threw their way. The land was more than dirt and sweat. It was history, unity, and above all, a testament to an unwavering spirit. In every corner of the community, they would persevere, fortified by the fire of togetherness, ready to stand tall against any threat. Bob smiled, a wave of warmth washing over him. They would protect their legacy, for the land would always belong to those who cared enough to defend it. Today, they had not only safeguarded his farm, they had sparked a flame of hope that would light the way for generations to come. The sun hung low in the autumn sky, casting an amber glow over the vast fields of rising valley. Rows of corn stood tall, swaying gently in the wind. To most, it was just farmland, but to Jack Reynolds, it was everything. Generations of his family had toiled under the sun, planting seeds, harvesting crops, and nurturing the land. It was sacred ground. But today, as he wiped the sweat from his brow, a sense of unease gnawed at him. He sensed something was off. The air felt heavy with tension, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. Then it hit him, the unmistakable rumble of engines in the distance. Jack squinted toward the dirt road that led from the highway. His heart raced as 3 black SUVs emerged from the dust, rolling toward his property with a chilling purpose. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He recognized the vehicles belonging to a local gang infamous for land grabs and intimidation tactics. His instincts kicked in as he jogged toward the main gate, his boots thudding against the dirt. Tension blossomed in his chest. He could hear the distant voices of a group he knew too well, men who thrived on fear and chaos. As the SUVs came to a stop, Jack's determination hardened. The door swung open, and out stepped Marco the Bull Vasquez, a man whose mere presence commanded attention. He was all muscle and arrogance, flanked by two goons who had no hesitation about using violence to get what they wanted. Marco called, a sinister smile stretching across his face. Jack squared his shoulders, resolve shining in his eyes. "We've got nothing to discuss, Marco. This land isn't for sale." The gang leader stepped closer, his grin widening, a predator eyeing its prey. "You think you can stand here and tell me what I can't take?" Jack's heart thundered. Fear crept in, but he fought it back, bolstered by the weight of his father's lessons and his ancestors' blood running through his veins. "This land has been in my family for generations." Marco's eyes narrowed, a flash of annoyance sparking behind his bravado. "You're going to regret this. You think a couple of old stories can protect you?" The sun dipped lower, shadows lengthening across the field as Jack held his ground, clenching his jaw. "You think you can scare me into submission?" And there it was, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Marco's face. For a moment it seemed as if he didn't know how to respond. Jack could see it in the man's eyes. He wasn't used to facing someone who refused to back down. Marco said, his tone dripping with malice. As Marco waved his men forward, Jack's instincts kicked into high gear. He had to act fast. Jack sprinted toward the barn, heart racing as adrenaline surged. He reached for his old shotgun, a family heirloom passed down through generations, something that had saved him once before. He didn't want to use it, but he realized he might have no choice. With the weapon heavy in his hands, he returned to the yard where Marco and his crew had taken a few steps closer. "You come onto my land uninvited, and you think I'll just let you take it? You're wrong," Jack shouted, his voice reverberating with authority. Marco's men paused, glancing back at their leader, gauging the situation. But Marco just laughed, a throaty, bitter sound in the crisp evening air. "Really, Jack, you think a rusty old gun will intimidate me?" As he took a step closer, Jack raised the shotgun, his hands steady, heart thundering in his chest. "You keep approaching, and I'll show you just how rusty it is." A tense silence fell over the yard, the sun slipping beneath the horizon. It seemed the entire world held its breath, caught in the electric anticipation of the moment. Marco challenged, stepping even closer, his bravado washed over with hubris. It was then that the unexpected happened. A voice rang out from behind Jack. Jack turned to see his neighbor, Earl, stepping up beside him. Earl was a hefty man in overalls, a no-nonsense type who had been his friend for years. Behind him, a handful of other farmers from the community gathered, hearts pounding with shared fury. Earl declared, "You think you can bully our friend?" Jack felt a wave of gratitude wash over him, the unbreakable bond of friendship enveloping him like armor. Together, they stood stronger. Marco's smirk faded, and doubt flickered in his eyes as he faced the growing crowd, recognizing that the numbers had shifted against him. "You think this is a game?" He retorted, but the uncertainty laced in his voice was unmistakable. The old farmers tightened their fists, determination flaring in their eyes. "You don't scare us, Marco," someone shouted from the back. Jack felt emboldened by their bravery, a fierce spirit igniting within him. "I won't let you tear apart this community." Earl chimed in, raising a pitchfork, his face stone-cold serious. It was clear to Marco now that this wasn't just a fight for land anymore. This was a fight against a united community, one that had long been battered by tempestuous storms but was finally ready to stand tall. "All right then," Marco spat, his bravado breaking. With a signaling glare, he ordered his men to step back, allowing a brief pause to hang in the air. But Jack and his crew knew better than to drop their guard. Marco said as they retreated toward their vehicles. The tension prickled in the air as the gang drove off, dust swirling behind them. Jack let out a shaky breath, feeling the collective relief wash over the gathered crowd. They had held their ground for now, but the battle was far from over. "Thank you, my friends," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion as he looked at the faces around him, their expressions a mixture of relief and pride. Earl nodded, a smile breaking across his rugged countenance. "We're all in this together, Jack." As the sun vanished completely, leaving behind a blanket of stars, Jack and his neighbors shared stories and laughter, a newfound sense of unity binding them. They plotted their next steps, clearing the air heavy with uncertainty. Together, they organized watch groups and established a line of communication to stay alert. Days turned into weeks, during which Jack made it a mission to fortify his land. The community rallied together, repairing fences, strengthening gates, and sharpening their tools, not just for farming but for defense. It became a symbol of their struggle and resilience. But the whispers of Marco and his crew lingered in the air like shadows. Jack knew they wouldn't stay quiet for long. He felt it in his bones. Another confrontation loomed on the horizon. One fateful night, after a long day of working the fields, Jack stood on his porch, the moon hanging high, quiet and watchful. Suddenly, he spotted headlights approaching down the dirt road. Panic surged through him. He recognized the vehicles immediately, Marco and his gang, returning and seemingly more prepared than before. Jack sprinted into the yard, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The neighbors quickly gathered, united as before, each carrying whatever they could find to defend their home. Marco, ever the provocateur, stepped out of his SUV, flanked by double the men he had brought before. The wolfish grin returned, wider this time, fueled by arrogance and a sense of superiority. "You thought you could stand against us?" Jack stepped forward, gun steady in his hands, courage deep in his heart. "You don't intimidate us, Marco." The gang advanced, but this time the line of farmers stood strong, unwavering. Tensions erupted, words were exchanged, and fists clenched tight, leading to an explosive standoff. As they rushed forward into the fray, Jack raised his shotgun into the air, firing a shot that thundered through the night. The sound reverberated, catching everyone's attention. It wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action, rallying his friends to take the fight back to the land. What erupted was nothing less than chaos, a whirlwind of shouts, tools raised high, and fighters clashing against bullies with nothing left to lose. Jack felt invigorated by the rush around him. He had returned to the soul of who he was: protector of his land, defender of family. The fight raged, but slowly, the tides began to turn. Marco's men, once brimming with confidence, faltered against the fierce determination of farmers who knew their lives depended on winning this battle. One by one, Marco's thugs began to retreat, confusion and fear etched across their faces. The community was alive, invigorated by their union, each heart beating as one a living testament that they wouldn't allow anyone to take away their soul. Marco's face twisted in rage as his strength waned. He shouted, but his voice trembled as he turned to flee. Jack stepped forward, his heart pounding with victory as they pushed back their assailants, reestablishing their ground. "This is our land," he called after them. With Marco and his remaining crew fleeing into the darkness, the farmers erupted in victory, wrapping one another in hugs, laughter piercing the heavy, once ominous night. They had succeeded, but it was more than victory. It was a rallying of souls, an unbreakable bond forged under fire. Jack took a moment to breathe, surveying the land he loved. The moonlight shimmered across the fields, illuminating the paths of hard work and resilience carved deep into the soil. He knew they had faced darkness and emerged stronger, more united than ever before. As the sun rose the next morning, painting the sky with hues of gold and warmth, Jack gathered his friends. They stood together, leaning against the wooden fence that had withstood the evening storm, their shoulders brushing, a family forged by both love and struggle. "Thank you all," he said, voice steady and proud. "This land is ours, and we won't ever let anyone take it from us again." And with that, they turned their backs to the remnants of fear, and their gazes set on the endless fields before them. This land would thrive, just like the spirit of the community they had built, firm, unwavering, and fiercely resilient against anything that tried to tear them apart. They were alive, and they would continue to fight for every inch and every heartbeat that belonged to them. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the perfectly straight rows of corn that seemed to stretch endlessly across the land. As he wiped the sweat from his brow, Sam Harper stood at the edge of his field, feeling the weight of generations pressing down on him. This was his family's land, a place where memories lived and hard work had borne immeasurable fruit. But today, that weight felt heavier than ever. A low rumble interrupted the serene ambience of the late afternoon. Sam squinted down the gravel road, his heart pounding. 3 black trucks rolled into sight, dust rising behind them like a ghost trailing in their wake. Sam's stomach knotted. The vehicles belonged to a notorious gang, the Iron Fist crew known for seizing land with fear and violence. He turned and made his way to the front porch, a sense of dread mingling with determination. He had heard the stories. Good people had lost their homes because they dared to stand up against these men. Their methods were ruthless and they didn't hesitate to intimidate. But this was not just land. This was Sam's family legacy. He wouldn't let them take it without a fight. The trucks parked, and out stepped Tony the Bull Rodriguez, the gang's leader, who was just as formidable as his name suggested. Towering and broad-shouldered, Tony had an unsettling smile that made blood run cold. 2 burly men flanked him, their muscles bulging beneath tight shirts, faces blank with menace. "Evening, Sam," Tony called, swaggering toward the porch. Sam echoed, the word sour in his mouth. "I have nothing to say to you, Tony." Tony chuckled darkly, the sound grating on Sam's nerves. "You might want to reconsider that. This place has potential." Sam took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the fading sun on his back. "I built this farm with my own 2 hands. My father worked this land and his father before him." For a fleeting moment, anger crossed over Tony's face. He wasn't used to being challenged. "You think you can stand in my way? That stubbornness of yours will only end in pain." The silence stretched, thick with tension, and Sam felt his pulse quicken. There was fear buzzing in the air, but he fought against it, grounding himself in the history of his family's toil. This land was sacred. Sam felt it course through his veins. "I won't back down," he declared, voice strong. Tony's smile faded, giving way to a steely glare. With that, Tony turned and signaled his henchmen. But just as they moved closer, another sound echoed through the valley, a distant rumble but not of engines. It was the sound of boots on grass. Sam turned and saw a group of his neighbors gathering at the edge of the field, eyes wide with concern but also with a flicker of defiance. Shouted Ethan, a young farmer from down the road, stepping forward. "We're with you." That spark ignited something in Sam. The sight of familiar faces filled him with courage. These were the people who had shared their joys and sorrows, their laughter and their heartaches. Together, they formed a community that wouldn't easily yield. Piped up Margaret, an elderly widow with a fierce spirit. "We've taken enough of their nonsense." Tony's bravado faltered, swapped for an expression of disbelief. He was caught off guard. In all his years of intimidation, he hadn't expected the farmer to rally his neighbors. The old tactics of fear wouldn't work when heart met heart. "Well, that's cute," he sneered, trying to regain control. Sam stepped forward, unfazed. "We're not just farmers, we're a family." Tony's eyes flicked between Sam and the gathering crowd, uncertainty swirling in his gaze. This wasn't just a fight for land anymore. It had transformed into a battle for dignity and survival. They had united, and that strengthened resolve was palpable. Tony spat, frustration rising. The tension crackled like static electricity. Suddenly, his henchmen lunged forward, their intentions clear, but Sam was ready. Reverberating through the air was the sound of a shotgun being cocked. Ethan had brought his hunting rifle, holding it steady and focused, stance unwavering. "Do you really want to test us?" In that moment, Tony understood he and his crew had miscalculated. They could bully one man, but they couldn't trample the spirit of a community. He growled, retreating to the trucks, fury written all over his face. As the engines roared to life and the trucks sped away, the community erupted in cheers, the sound intermingling with laughter and relief. Sam felt a tide of gratitude wash over him as he looked at the faces surrounding him, cheeks flushed, eyes shining with newfound courage. They had won this round, but Sam knew Tony would return. In the following weeks, the days blurred into a cycle of hard work and preparation. Together, they fortified the farm, gathering tools and equipment, reinforcing fences and organizing patrols. Farmer after farmer, they shared their story seeds of hope planted deep in the soil of resilience. But the peace was fragile. Sam couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching from the shadows. Then, as twilight approached one chilling evening, the storm that Sam had dreaded finally breached the horizon. Footsteps echoed in the stillness, but these were not the comforting sounds of neighbors tending to the fields. Instead, they came menacingly closer, heavy boots crunching against gravel accompanied by the low growl of engines. Sam's heart raced. He peered through the window and there they were, the familiar dark silhouettes of the trucks. The Iron Fist crew had returned, this time with reinforcements, hovering like vultures over fresh prey. The mood shifted. He could feel the tension in his gut curl tighter than ever. Sam turned to his neighbors who had gathered in his home for their routine meeting, faces set with determination. "We have to be ready," he instructed, his voice steady though his heart was pounding in his ears. Ethan nodded, grasping his rifle with a firm grip. "We'll stand by you, Sam. We're stronger together." Just as they prepared themselves, a sharp knock reverberated against the wooden door, brutally breaking the tension in the air. Sam instinctively reached for the handle, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He flung the door open and there stood Tony, flanked by more thugs than before. Dressed in black, they loomed larger than life. Tony smirked, studying Sam and the assembled group with malice. "Evening again, everyone," he drawled, confidence dripping from him. "Seems you're still hanging around." Sam's voice was firm, though his heart was racing. Tony echoed, amused. "I want what's mine." With that, he gestured to his crew, who began advancing forward. The air thickened with hostility and Sam's instincts kicked in. He could feel the support of his friends by his side, emboldening him with courage. Sam shouted as confrontation loomed, a fierce light blazing in his eyes. Tony's laugh echoed eerily in the stillness as he issued a silent signal to his men, who surged forward. Sam's mind raced. He motioned for his neighbors to gather closer, heart pounding, bracing for whatever storm was about to hit. He yelled. The first clash erupted. Sam could hear the shouts and the clang of metal against metal, swinging pitchforks and kitchen utensils merging into a frenzy. It was chaos, but amidst the tumult, a sense of solidarity infused the Era community, pushing back against tyranny. Outside, the fight raged, and each farmer unleashed their fury against the ones in their way. It wasn't just a fight, it was a battle for land and family, a testament of their resilience woven through generations. Sam found himself facing Tony, fists swinging. The two engaged in a dance of rage, each blow echoing the toil of years. Sam felt every ounce of energy surge through him, fueled by adrenaline and the weight of his lineage. Sam grunted, the tension feeding his determination. Tony spat back, his rage palpable. With each swing, Sam felt the resolve of his friends behind him, giving him strength. They wouldn't let this man dictate their fate. They were ready to fight for the land that nurtured them. Sam shouted, as the final blow sent Tony sprawling back. As Tony staggered, his crew began to lose confidence, glancing at each other, uncertainty blooming in their eyes. The chaotic brawl shifted into a realignment as Sam's neighbors rallied, sensing victory in the air. Someone shouted, and with newfound resolve, the tide turned further against Tony and his gang. They were met with tools raised high, shock and fear etched across their faces. The gangs began to break rank, retreating in disarray. Sam couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. They were reclaiming their land, relying on each other. Glances were exchanged, hearts racing with joy. The Iron Fist crew hadn't just been pushed back, they had been sent scattering back to the shadows where they belonged. Pride filled the air as the last of the gang fled, engines roaring angrily in the distance. Sam stood amidst his friends, gasping for breath, cheers erupting around him. They had fought through chaos and emerged victorious. Sam yelled, and the group erupted once more, joining hands and laughing, tears of relief mixing with joy as they celebrated their unwavering strength. In the days that followed, the bonds of friendship grew even more profound. They gathered in Sam's barn to share stories, each soul intertwined, woven into the very fabric of the land they cherished. With every laugh and hug, they fostered a resilience that would shape their futures. Though the shadows of conflict loomed on the edges, Sam felt something shift that day. It was more than just a victory in battle. It was the birth of a community that would stand solid against any threat. As seasons passed and crops flourished under the diligent care of those united, it became evident that they had not only reclaimed their land, they had nurtured a family that echoed with love, resilience, and defiance. In time, the echoes of the Iron Fist crew faded into the past, but they carried the lessons forward of family, courage, and the unyielding spirit that could withstand any storm. Sam Harper would always stand as a guardian of his land, a warrior for his community. Together, they nurtured the soil, sowed the seeds of hope, and created a legacy that would continue to grow, unwavering against the challenges of tomorrow. They had found their strength in each other, and in that, the spirit of the land soared. The sun was just dipping below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the fields of Green Valley. Arthur Hayes stood on the porch of his modest farmhouse, surrounded by the crops he had nurtured for decades. This land was more than just soil and seeds to him. It was his family's legacy, a patch of earth built on hard work, love, and a promise to keep the farm alive for future generations. But tonight, that promise felt compromised. A low rumble shattered the tranquil evening. Arthur squinted down the dirt road leading to his home, his heart pounding in his chest. 3 black SUVs emerged from a cloud of dust, engines growling like a pack of wolves. A chill rushed through him. He recognized the vehicles immediately. They belonged to the Knights of Steel, a gang notorious for bullying farmers into selling their land at a pittance. As the trucks rolled to a halt, Arthur's gut clenched. Out stepped Marcus the Hammer Malone, a man whose reputation for violence made the bravest men waver. Flanked by 2 muscle-bound enforcers, Marcus strode toward Arthur with an arrogance that made sweat bead on Arthur's forehead. "Evening, Arthur," Marcus announced, his voice dripping with false friendliness. Arthur's grip tightened around the porch railing, his jaw clenched. "This land isn't for sale, Marcus." Marcus chuckled, a low, menacing sound that echoed across the yard. "You misunderstand, my friend. I'm not asking, I'm telling you." Arthur stepped off the porch, staring Marcus down. "You think you can just roll in here and bully me into selling?" His voice was firm, the resolve grounding him like the roots of the crops that surrounded him. Marcus replied, his grin widening. "You'll regret this, old man." Before Arthur could respond, a rustling caught his attention. He turned and saw his neighbors coming up the road, their expressions a mix of concern and determination. These were the people he had worked alongside for years, sharing laughter and toil, and now they stood together behind him. Shouted Tom, a tall farmer from down the road. The sight of his friends filled Arthur with renewed strength. "You see," he called out to Marcus, "this land isn't just mine, it belongs to all of us." Marcus's gaze darkened, glancing between Arthur and the gathering crowd. For a brief moment, he seemed taken aback. He laughed, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice, a flicker of doubt. "We're not scared of you," Tom shouted, stepping forward. Echoed another neighbor, a young woman named Lisa. The palpable energy shifted the atmosphere. Where there had once been fear, there was now fire. Arthur felt the heavy blanket of intimidation lifting, replaced by a collective courage that enveloped them all. Marcus asked, his voice trembling slightly in contrast to his previously booming bravado. Arthur stepped forward, heart pounding in rhythm with the determination surging through his friends. "Then you better come at us with everything you've got, because we won't back down." With that, Marcus waved his hand, ordering his goons to step forward, but Arthur raised his voice again. Suddenly, chaos erupted. Shouts filled the air as Arthur's neighbors charged forward, standing shoulder to shoulder, united against the intruders. The contrast was stark. The gang, brimming with arrogance, faced a community bolstered by friendship and mutual respect. With fists raised, Arthur felt a surge of adrenaline. He had never fought before, but this was different. This was a fight for his home, his legacy. As the first blows landed, a strange sense of purpose washed over him. The fight wasn't just for his land. It was for all the families that had come together to defend what was rightfully theirs. Shouted Tom as he swung hard, catching one of Marcus's henchmen off guard. Arthur shouted, grabbing hold of a sturdy hoe and swinging it like a protective shield. his heart racing as he engaged in the fray. Minutes felt like hours as the fight raged on, energy surging back and forth. Arthur remembered his father's stories about standing up to bullies, tales filled with lessons that echoed in his heart now. Each swing, each shout, felt like a reclaiming of his right to this land. As the tussle escalated, Arthur became acutely aware of the stakes. He punched and pushed back, the adrenaline pumping through his veins, but he was also aware of the eyes of his friends beside him. They were counting on him to lead, to protect. Eventually, a frantic shout cut through the chaos. Someone yelled as Marcus himself lunged forward, a menacing figure pushing through the fray. In that moment, fear washed over Arthur, but he quickly shook it off. He spotted a nearby fence post. Without thinking, he grabbed it and swung it toward Marcus as the thug barreled toward him. The sound of wood smashing against muscle reverberated through the air, stunning Marcus momentarily. Arthur bellowed again, the fire of his spirit lighting up the night. The tides of the battle began to shift as Arthur's neighbors rallied behind him, using whatever tools they could find to defend themselves and push back against Marcus's crew. As more farmers joined in, it was as if they were reclaiming something deeply buried, a sense of power and community that had long been overshadowed by fear. With every shove, punch, and swing, they began to take back control of their destinies. Finally, the balance tipped. Arthur and his friends pushed back Marcus's gang, who, stunned by the united front, began to retreat. The realization hit Marcus hard. They were fighting a battle they couldn't win. Back, he yelled to his men, glaring at Arthur with seething rage. Sam's heart raced when he saw the shift, the fear, the doubt etched on the faces of Marcus and his crew. They were falling apart and they were about to lose the fight. Arthur shouted, the momentum switching with each declaration. As the last remnants of resistance crumbled amid yelling and chaos, Marcus turned tail, scrambling toward his retreating gang. The sense of victory poured over Arthur and his neighbors like a warm blanket. They were not just farmers anymore. They were fighters, a united front driven by an undeniable power to reclaim what was theirs. That night the grounds remained silent, but the air was electric with newfound hope. Neighborhood gatherings transformed into celebrations. They shared laughter and tears, invigorated by their shared triumph. Over the following weeks, the farmers banded together like never before. They organized meetings in the old wooden barn, discussing strategies for protecting their homes and laying plans that would strengthen their bonds. Each shared meal became a testament to their fortitude, a culinary celebration that hardened their spirit. Arthur felt the community blossom around him, neighbors becoming family. They worked the fields side by side, lifting bales of hay, planting seeds, and nurturing the crops. That bond fortifying them against any threat, whether it be the elements or any gang looking to tear them apart. But deep down, Arthur knew it wasn't over. Marcus was still out there, licking his wounds, nursing the bitterness of defeat. The thought weighed on him, casting shadows of doubt. The quiet nights became an unending reminder that the Knights of Steel wouldn't simply vanish. One fateful evening, as the sun set and dusk painted the sky in shades of crimson, Arthur stood at the edge of the field, feeling the cool breeze on his skin. The fields glimmered under the waning light, promising. And then he saw them black trucks rolling up the road once again, looming against the horizon like a storm cloud. His heart sank as old fears ignited, but then he turned and saw his neighbors gathering, solidarity blooming amongst them. Shoulders squared, hands clenching tools, a wall of determination forming at his side. Arthur shouted, his voice carrying across the yard. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, their fight-or-flight instincts kicked in. They fortified themselves side by side as the trucks rolled to a stop, and Marcus stepped out, his expression dark with fury. The air thickened with tension and silence fell like a heavy curtain. Marcus smirked, eyes glinting with malice. Arthur stepped forward, shoulders squared. "You don't intimidate us anymore, Marcus." As his neighbors prepared for another round, Arthur felt the pulse of unity thrill through them all. This was not just his land. This was theirs, a community forged in the fires of adversity. With that unspoken bond anchoring their resolve, They braced themselves for the waves of chaos that crashed down like thunder. Fighting for their land took on a whole new meaning. This was about much more than crops. It was about honor, dignity, and the heart of every family that called that land home. As blows were exchanged once more, the struggle tore through the night, electricity sparking with each strike, a testament to their fierce spirit. But this time, they weren't just trying to fend off an invader, they were reclaiming their power, their right to that land. As punches flew and tools whipped through the air, there was a rhythm to the chaos. Bonded together, they pushed back against the shadows, unwavering, unbreakable. In the thick of it, Arthur's heart raced, sensing the stakes grow higher, the fight more intense. Yet he could feel something shift, the spirit of the farm wrapping itself around him like a protective cloak. With the support of his friends, they began to regain control, pushing back against the encroaching threat. Each swing of a pitchfork or shovel felt right, righteous even. Marcus shouted commands to his men, but it was clear that they were fading, losing ground as Arthur and his neighbors closed in with unwavering resolve. Marcus shouted, desperation creeping into his voice as the tide turned. Arthur called, and they surged forward, exhilaration surged within them. As day broke, the dawn marked not just the end of battle, but a new beginning. Marcus and his men scrambled away, the last remnants of intimidation fading into the distance. The air buzzed with victory and relief. Cheers erupted as Arthur stood with his friends, the rising sun illuminating their faces, strength and determination etched into each brow. They had fought for their land and won, not as individuals, but as a community. Over the coming weeks, the spirit of camaraderie flourished. They planted new seeds in the soil, tended to the fields as they had always done, but there was something different now, a strength that bound them closer than ever before. As seasons changed, Arthur saw how they became a family in every sense of the word, a network of support, laughter, and love. The Knights of Steel had tried to break them, but instead, they had ignited a fire that couldn't be extinguished. And on that land, amidst the growth and the bounty, Arthur knew in his heart that they had built more than just a farm. They had built a legacy of resilience, passion, and an unbreakable bond that would stand the test of time. Their story would echo through the generations, a potent reminder that courage, when shared, can turn the tide against any challenge. And together, they stood as a testament to the power of community, fighting against the darkness to protect what was rightfully theirs. In the heart of Green Valley, a new dawn had arrived, vibrant and enduring, and the land with all its promise belonged to those who dared to defend it. The sun hung low in a bruised sky, casting eerie shadows over the sprawling fields of Maple Grove. The wind whispered through the tall corn stalks as Samuel Turner wiped the sweat from his brow and stared into the horizon. To him, this land was more than just a patch of earth. It was his family's legacy, rich with memories and a history crafted through hard work. But today, a storm was brewing, a much graver kind than the weather could muster. A faint rumble drew Samuel's gaze to the road leading to his farm. The sound reverberated in his chest like distant thunder. 3 black trucks emerged from a cloud of dust, engines growling like predatory beasts. Samuel's heart dropped. He recognized those vehicles instantly. It was the notorious Rebel Crew, a gang known for pushing farmers off their land through fear and intimidation. As they rolled to a stop in front of his farmhouse, Samuel's stomach twisted into knots. Out of the lead truck stepped Tony the Tiger Ruiz, a man whose reputation struck terror into the hearts of many. With slick-back hair and a swagger that screamed arrogance, he was flanked by 2 of his enforcers, both built like brick walls. The sight made Samuel's blood run cold. Tony called, a grin stretching across his face. It was a smile that held no warmth, only the promise of trouble. Samuel squared his shoulders, forcing himself to hold his ground. "Talk, there's nothing to discuss." "Oh, you'll sell," Tony replied, stepping closer. "Or you'll regret it. We're willing to make a fair offer." Samuel clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. "I won't sell. This land has been in my family for generations." Tony's smile faded, replaced by a glimmer of annoyance. He gestured toward his henchmen. "You really think you can fight us?" As he spoke, Samuel could sense the air thickening with tension, almost electric. Behind him, he heard the familiar crunch of gravel and the soft murmur of voices. He turned to see a handful of his neighbors gathering at the edge of his property, their faces etched with concern and solidarity. "Sam!" shouted Karen, a farmer from down the road. She was holding a clipboard in one hand and courage in the other. The sight of his friends inflamed Samuel's spirit. "You see, Tony, this isn't just my farm, it's everyone's." Tony blinked, momentarily caught off guard. The bravado that usually dripped from him faltered. "You think you can take us on? You're just a bunch of scared farmers." Samuel stepped forward, fists clenched, heart racing. "Maybe we don't know how to fight like you, but we know how to defend what's ours." There was a brief silence, a thick moment hanging in the air, and Samuel felt adrenaline surging through him. The gathering crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement, emboldened by his words. Someone shouted from the back, rallying the others. Tony's smirk returned, now tinged with irritation. It was as if he had underestimated them and had been jolted to reality. "You're making a mistake, you know," shouted Karen, and the crowd echoed her resolve. Suddenly, Tony snapped, waving his hand to signal his men. Without hesitation, they moved closer, but Samuel raised his voice. He felt the weight of the moment fill him with strength. The air charged with a palpable intensity, and then chaos erupted. Samuel's neighbors surged forward, fists raised and tools grasped like weapons. They formed a line in front of Samuel, ready to protect what they all cherished. Tony's gang seemed momentarily shocked, faces contorted with disbelief as the crowd of farmers displayed unwavering solidarity. Samuel's heart thundered in his chest as he saw friend after friend join him, standing tall against the tyranny that had threatened them. Every shout, every movement felt like a reclaiming of power, an assertion that they would no longer live in fear. Someone screamed, and the chant rippled through the crowd, booming and fierce. Then the first blow landed. A flurry of fists, shovels, and pitchforks ignited the clash between the two sides. Farmers turned warriors against a gang that had long operated under the cloak of intimidation. In that mess of chaos, adrenaline surged through Samuel like wildfire. He had never fought before, but this moment propelled him forward. He swung his arms, hitting back against the force that threatened to take everything he loved. Samuel roared, the words echoing in the night, filled with raw emotion. But even amidst the frenzy, he couldn't ignore the flicker of fear deep inside him. Their numbers had seemed only slightly in favor of the gang, and doubt crept in. Would they be able to hold their ground against such aggression? But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw Karen grappling with one of Tony's henchmen, her fierce determination shining through like a beacon. She shouted, hitting him with whatever she could find. Seeing her courage reignited something in Samuel. They were a community. They owed it to each other to fight back, to stand together. He resolved not to allow fear to penetrate their collective spirit. As the battle wore on, it became clear to the crowd, to Tony, and to Samuel that the farmers were reclaiming their home. Each swing of a shovel, each shout of defiance, crafted a narrative written by hands hardened from years of toil. They weren't just defending their land, they were forging their identity as a community. After what felt like an eternity, the momentum began to shift. Tony's crew hesitated, looking between each other with a growing sense of doubt. The fierce preparation and tenacity of Samuel and his friends was overwhelming. The power dynamics that had once been so stark were beginning to tilt. "Back!" Tony shouted, anger bubbling beneath the surface as he realized the tide was against him. Samuel called after him, filled with newfound confidence. With that, the last remnants of Tony's gang scrambled into their trucks, engines revving. For the first time in a long while, Samuel felt like they could breathe again. As the dust settled, his neighbors began to cheer and embrace each other, hearts soaring with relief mixed with triumph. In the days following the confrontation, the spirit of community thrived. They met every week, sharing stories of their lives, their battles, and their dreams of a better future. The fear that had once held them captive unspooled, replaced by fertile soil for relationships to blossom. But Samuel was not naive. He knew Tony would be back. His spirit was unwilling to retreat easily, and a storm brewed on the horizon. One evening, as dusk cloaked the farm, Samuel stood at the edge of his property, the cool breeze brushing against his face. Suddenly he could see it, a line of headlights cutting through the darkness, drawing closer, and his heart sank. In the darkness, Tony returned, determination radiating from his very being. He stepped out of the truck, an army of henchmen behind him, their leering eyes reflecting a brutal resolve. Tony smirked, swaggering toward the gathering crowd. Samuel felt the familiar knot of anxiety settle in his stomach, but he also sensed the camaraderie of his friends and neighbors at his side. Together, they had faced the storm once before. They would do it again. He shouted, rallying his community. The menacing aura that Tony had braided into intimidation began to ripple in the opposite direction. As he surveyed the farmers standing united with makeshift weapons at the ready, the mirth in Tony's eyes began to fade. Tony shouted, his bravado cracking. "You call this a community? Fools or not," shouted Karen, "we fight for each other." There was a sudden silence that enveloped them, and for a brief moment it felt like time stood still, poised on a knife edge. Fear evaporated, replaced by a collective courage born of flames. Together they formed a wall, unyielding and determined. Samuel yelled, feeling the power surge through him. With that, the confrontation ignited again. Blows rang out and the world exploded in motion. It was a clash of wills, chaos enveloping the night as fists and voices collided. But Samuel felt invincible. Time slowed as he charged forward, fueled by the love for his land and community. He took a hard swing at one of Tony's men, feeling the connection, the raw satisfaction of standing up for what he believed in. Yet, in the heart of the turmoil, Samuel quickly noticed something. They were winning. Each swing and shout felt like a reclaiming of their lives, the soil beneath their feet pulsating with the strength of their unity. In the throes of the battle, Tony's bravado crumbled. His men began to waver, glancing around as if seeking an escape route. Samuel's neighbors, fueled by their unspeakable determination, pushed forward, taking ground step by step. Together, Samuel shouted, the fire within him driving them to press onward. Finally, as the chaos reached a fever pitch, a piercing shout rang out. Tony exclaimed, eyes wide with fury and disbelief. With that, he turned and fled, dragging the remnants of his crew behind him like discarded scraps. As the dust settled once more, the farmers erupted into cheers, laughter rinsing away the remnants of fear. They had not only defended their land, they had reclaimed their lives, their identities, and their bonds. That evening, they gathered under the stars, the light illuminating their faces. They shared stories of courage, of standing together against the darkness, heartbeats resonating in harmony. Samuel felt the warmth of camaraderie wash over him. They weren't just friends. They were a family forged in the fire of struggle and resilience. They had built something more beautiful than land. They had cultivated a spirit that refused to wither in the face of fear. And as the cycles of the seasons continued, the legacy of Maple Grove blossomed. The shadows had not just receded. They had transformed into stories of bravery and unity that would be passed down through generations. With every sunrise illuminating the fields, Samuel reinforced the idea that a community bound by love could stand against the most insurmountable odds. So far beyond defending their land, it became a testament to the enduring will of humanity, and the promise that even in darkness, unity could light the way. Together, they nurtured the soil, grew the seeds of their hopes, and reclaimed what had always been theirs, a future rooted in courage and connectedness. The sun hung heavy in the sky, casting long shadows across the golden fields of Oak Ridge Farm. Ethan Thompson wiped the sweat from his brow, surveying the land that had belonged to his family for generations. Each inch of soil was steeped in memories, the laughter of children playing, the toil of hard work, and the dreams of a future brimming with hope. But today, beneath the weight of that history, a palpable tension began to stir in the air. The familiar sound of rumbling engines broke the serene afternoon. Ethan squinted down the long dirt road just as 3 black SUVs appeared, kicking up dust like ominous omens. His heart raced. He recognized them instantly. The trucks belonged to the Dagger crew, a ruthless gang known for muscling in on farmers, trying to take their land by intimidation and force. He felt a shiver run down his spine as the vehicles came to a stop. Out stepped the gang leader, a man known as Trevor the Viper Martin. Tall and intimidating with a grin that sent chills down the spine, Trevor was flanked by two burly enforcers who looked more like brick walls than men. With each step they took toward his porch, Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Trevor called out, his voice dripping with insincerity. Ethan swallowed hard, his determination battling against the mounting fear. "My land isn't for sale, Trevor." Trevor chuckled, a sinister sound that echoed in the afternoon air. "That's where you're wrong, buddy. This land has potential, and I think it's about time we discussed a deal. I'd rather plow the fields with my bare hands than sell to scum like you," Ethan shot back, gripping the edge of the porch to steady himself. This place was everything to him. He wouldn't let it slip through his fingers without a fight. The playful demeanor on Trevor's face flickered, revealing a glimpse of anger, but he masked it with a chuckle. "You think you can stand against me?" Just as the tension thickened, a rustle behind Ethan caught his attention. He turned to see his neighbors gathering at the edge of his property, their expressions a mix of concern and determination. These were the people he had farmed alongside for years, friends who understood the fear and stakes of this moment. Shouted Carl, a stout farmer with a no-nonsense attitude. The words fueled a fire within Ethan. "You see, Trevor, this is more than just my land, it belongs to all of us." The unexpected solidarity took Trevor aback. He glanced at his enforcers, hesitating for a moment, their bravado cracking ever so slightly. He sneered, still trying to reclaim his authority. Ethan stepped forward, feeling the unwavering strength of his friends beside him. "Yeah, we do." Suddenly, Trevor snapped, his voice rising in anger as he gestured towards his men. "You think this is a joke?" Ethan's heart raced as chaos erupted. The gang moved forward and instinct kicked in. He shouted, urging his neighbors to form a line. They braced themselves as the first wave of thugs approached, fists raised and eyes ablaze with the thrill of dominance. In the midst of the chaos, time seemed to slow. Ethan's adrenaline surged like electricity, igniting every fiber of his being. He had never been in a fight like this before, but he felt the weight of generations behind him. With a wooden shovel in hand, he charged forward. The clash broke out like a thunderstorm, fists flying and shouts filling the air. The farmers fought back with everything they had, using pitchforks and shovels, their momentum fueled by camaraderie and the shared experience of defending their homes. Ethan bellowed, swinging with all his might, connecting with one of Trevor's henchmen and sending him reeling back. He could feel the sting of adrenaline coursing through his veins, a primal rush pushing him forward. Yelled Karen, a fierce neighbor who had always been there through thick and thin, now thrusting a hoe at an approaching thug. But as the fight raged on, Ethan could see that numbers mattered even more than courage. For every blow they landed, the gang came back harder, larger, backed by the confidence that they were used to getting what they wanted. Ethan felt a wave of doubt wash over him. Would they be able to hold the line? But in that moment of uncertainty, a renewed energy surged through him as he turned to see the faces of his neighbors emboldened by the fight. They weren't just defending their land, they were fighting for each other, a community standing united against an encroaching threat. Ethan yelled, his voice ringing out like a clarion call, igniting the spirit within his fellow farmers. Encouraged, they pushed forward, keeping the gang at bay. The battle intensified, confusion swirling as fists and tools clashed. It was a clash of lives, symbols of hard work colliding against the mercenary aggression of the gang. It felt chaotic, yet there was a rhythm to it, a tapestry woven through the desperation of defending something precious. Then from the fray, Trevor's voice boomed, calling for his men to regroup. "We're not done yet." Ethan's heart raced. He realized then that time was of the essence. They couldn't let fear drive them back at this crucial moment. Keep pushing. The tide began to shift. With every unified shout, with every friend's resolve intertwined in a common purpose, they pushed back against Trevor and his gang. As the noise crescendoed, it was clear that they were not only defending their land, they were reclaiming their pride. With a fleeting glance, Ethan caught Tony staring back, shock and rage battling on his face. The bravado was gone. They had underestimated the power of a community. People who stood together became more than the sum of their parts. They became warriors. In the heat of the moment, a wild swing from one of Trevor's men knocked Ethan to the ground, wind knocked from his lungs. Gasping for air, he struggled to rise, but just as he regained his footing, he saw Trevor bearing down on him, fury radiating from every pore. Trevor shouted, pushing past the line of farmers who held their ground bravely. Ethan's heart raced as he scrambled backward, his surroundings blurring in his peripheral vision. As Trevor lunged, Ethan instinctively grabbed a nearby shovel, raising it just in time to block the blow that could have ended everything. In that moment, something shifted deep within him. His fear transformed into steadfast determination. He shouted back as he swung the shovel forward, connecting with Trevor's midsection. Stumbling backward, Trevor's eyes widened in disbelief. The gang leader realized he was no longer in control. For the first time, his bravado faltered as he took a step back. "Retreat!" He hissed through clenched teeth, shock and rage intertwining in his voice as he signaled his gang to pull away. The air reverberated with victory as the gang scrambled back to their SUVs, retreating under the piercing eyes of the united farmers. In the aftermath of the scuffle, breaths came hard and fast, but relief washed over them like a warm tide. Ethan stood amidst the cheers of his neighbors, their faces filled with pride and exhilaration. They had fought back against fear, reclaiming not just their land but their dignity as well. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything they had just faced. They had triumphed, but the battle wasn't over. In the following days, calls echoed throughout the community. They worked together to repair fences and mend the scars that had been left on their land. But anxiety gnawed at Ethan's insides. He knew the Dagger crew would be back, more relentless than ever. The fear of losing everything weighed heavily on his heart. One stormy evening, as rain lashed the farmhouse, Ethan sat at the worn wooden table, deep in thought. The pounding rain mirrored the tumult inside him. He tried to focus on the task at hand, but his mind drifted to dark thoughts. Suddenly, a loud crash outside jolted him from his reverie. The sound of a vehicle engine drew closer, skidding to a halt in the rain-soaked driveway. Samuel leaped to his feet, heart hammering in his chest. He dashed to the window, peeking through the curtains as shadows emerged against the night. A flicker of headlights illuminated the porch, and then he saw them 4 figures climbing out of the SUVs, clad in rain gear. Panic surged through his veins. This wasn't a simple visit. They were coming to finish what they had started. Without hesitating, Ethan bolted for the door, the adrenaline of urgency propelling him forward. It was time to stand his ground again. Just as he slid to the porch, a pair of headlights swung toward him, illuminating a figure with a familiar sneer. "Ethan." Trevor's voice dripped with malice, the rain pouring around him like a shroud of darkness. Ethan gritted his teeth, heart racing with fear and anger. "I'm not afraid of you, Trevor." As Trevor smiled, the flicker of something dangerous in his eye sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. "Oh, we're not here just for the land anymore, old friend." Before Ethan could respond, the gang surged forward, their violence amplified by the fury of the storm. The air crackled with tension as rain hammered down, turning the ground into a slick battleground. In that moment, Ethan faced the precipice of his greatest challenge yet. Would this be the final confrontation for everything he held dear? With uncertainty swirling around him like the storm, he gripped the porch railing, and for a fleeting moment the question hung in the air. Would he stand tall, or would he be swept away in the tide of darkness threatening to engulf everything he cherished? The winds howled, and so did the hearts of those who dared to protect their legacy. But now, the battle for Oak Ridge Farm had reached a point of no return.